My lungs were filling with ash, and the cold of death was already claiming my extremities. On the horizon of Baran, surrounded by the smoking remains of my battalion, I watched the ultimate nightmare approach. A human. The predator my instructors had described as a demon of flesh and blind fury. I closed my eyes, expecting the killing blow. But what I felt was not the cold steel of a bayonet. It was the impossible warmth of hands that refused to let me slip into absolute darkness. The atmosphere of Baran is a slow poison that seeps through the seals of any armor, a cocktail of sulfur and silicon particles that shreds the alveoli with every breath. There I lay, my exoskeleton fractured and the blue ichor of my species staining the red dust of the ground, watching my own life evaporate under the pale sun of a system that did not want us. I am a Krell, a daughter of the warrior hive, trained from hatching to understand that the universe is a zero-sum game where weakness is a mortal sin and compassion is a biological flaw. They had taught us to fear humans. In our intelligence manuals, they were described as the most erratic and dangerous predators on the galactic periphery. Beings with no natural shells or poisonous stingers, but who compensated for their fragility with a thermal aggression capable of consuming entire planets. We called them the Obsidian Spectres. And now one of them stood before me, silhouetted against the glow of orbital fire still falling from the sky like tears of flame. The human, whom I would later come to know as Marcus, looked nothing like the killing machines my nightmares had projected. His armor was dented, crusted with mud and soot that obscured the insignias of the Terran Union. Through his polycarbonate visor, I could see his eyes. They were not the unfocused eyes of an insect. They were forward-facing predator eyes, intense, wet, charged with an energy I could not immediately identify. My breathing was an agonized wheeze, a constant reminder that a piece of shrapnel had pierced my second lung. Every beat of my 3 hearts sent waves of electric pain through my nervous system. And yet, the terror I felt at his presence surpassed any physical agony. I expected him to raise his pulse rifle. I expected him to finish the work the artillery had begun. But the human did something that shattered every logical framework I had. He knelt. The weight of his body made the ground crack beneath his reinforced boots. I could smell the metallic tang of his sweat and the ozone emanating from his damaged equipment. Marcus extended one hand, and I recoiled instinctively, dragging my wounded body across sharp rocks, leaving a trail of my own life essence in the dust. An involuntary growl escaped my mandibles, a weak warning that he ignored completely. Instead of subduing and destroying, his fingers, wrapped in tactical gauntlets, began to work with a delicacy that terrified me because it was so foreign. He pulled a medical supply pack from his belt. The hiss of a hemostatic gel applicator filled the air, and before I could process the betrayal of my own instincts, I felt a numbing cold spreading over my open wound. Why? That was the question hammering in my mind as the pain began to yield to the powerful human drugs. In Krell culture, a damaged unit is abandoned so its biomass can be recycled. There are no stretchers in our army. No field medics who risk their hides for a soldier who can no longer hold a weapon. But this human, this supposed frontier monster, was wasting critical resources on an enemy who, only hours earlier, would have tried to tear his head off. I watched as his hands trembled slightly. Not from fear. From the extreme physical exhaustion that only a mammal of his class could endure before his muscles collapsed from lactic acid buildup. He was wounded too. A deep gash crossed his thigh, and red blood, that color that for us symbolizes forbidden warmth, soaked his pants. Yet he did not tend to himself. His eyes remained fixed on my condition, monitoring my breathing rate with an almost religious attention. The crisis erupted when the sky, already darkened by war, filled with a mechanical hum I knew all too well. The Scavengers, autonomous drones from the rebel faction, designed to detect thermal signatures on desolate battlefields and collect any trace of useful technology or organic tissue. The first scanning pulse swept our position, illuminating the ground with a phantom red light. Marcus tensed. His posture changed in a nanosecond, shifting from caregiver to lethal protector. He looked at me, and for the first time, I understood human duality. In those eyes, I saw the capacity for infinite violence in service of absolute compassion. He knew we could not hide for long. My damaged exoskeleton emitted a heat signature that was like a beacon for the drone sensors. The human knew this, and yet instead of using me as bait to escape, he began improvising a stretcher from scraps of cable and a burnt cargo tarp. Every second that passed was another step toward mutual detection, and the urgency of the situation felt like a physical weight crushing the air between us. What happened next is something the historians of my race still try to explain through complex probability formulas, but I can only describe as the purest manifestation of human will. Marcus lifted me. He did not drag me. He did not force me to walk. He raised my weight, nearly double his own due to the density of my bone structure, and placed me on his back. I felt the heat of his body through the layers of his uniform. The effort was superhuman. His lungs worked like rusty bellows, emitting loud, forced sounds as he climbed the steep slope of a crater to avoid the drone's line of sight. I could feel his muscles tensing and vibrating under the pressure, his heart beating with a rhythmic fury that resonated against my own chest. It was not the strength of a machine. It was the strength of conscious choice. The scavengers descended. 3 light assault units, their optical lenses gleaming with electric malice. Marcus set me down carefully behind a pillar of melted basalt and turned to face the machines. He had no heavy ammunition, just a service pistol and a carbon alloy combat knife. I watched him fight. It was a dance of brutal necessity. He moved with an efficiency that defied fatigue, using the terrain as a weapon. He took hits from kinetic projectiles that would have shredded any one of my species, but the human endoskeleton, reinforced by adrenaline and that stubborn refusal to die, kept him standing. He bled from multiple wounds. His face was a mask of mud and crimson blood. But his screams were not of pain. They were an ancestral challenge that seemed to emanate from deep within his genetic code. When the last drone was reduced to smoking scrap, Marcus collapsed to his knees beside me. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the crackle of mechanical remains and his ragged breathing. I thought he would die there, that his body had finally said enough. But after a few minutes of terrifying stillness, he rose again. His hands, now covered in his own blood, returned to the improvised stretcher. He looked at me, and for the first time, he smiled. It was a strange expression, a contraction of facial muscles that in my culture might be interpreted as a threat, but in this context conveyed an unshakable reassurance. He was telling me, without words, that he would not leave me behind, even if the whole world crumbled around us. 4 hours, he carried me through the Baran Desert. He endured acid sandstorms that burned his exposed skin, shielding me with his own body when the gusts became too intense. He shared his meager water reserve with me, filtering it through a manual device so it would be compatible with my biology. Every time my senses began to fade, I felt his hand squeezing mine, physical contact that served as an anchor to reality. Humans have this terrifying and beautiful ability to transfer their own life force through mere intention. It was not just medicine keeping me alive. It was his determination that I should survive. Finally, we reached the extraction point. It was not a Krell ship, but a human medical transport that had descended in response to his emergency beacon. When the other humans emerged, rifles raised, they stopped cold at the scene. One of their own, a soldier on the brink of death from exhaustion and combat wounds, ferociously guarding an alien who was technically his mortal enemy. Marcus would not let them sedate me or treat me as a prisoner of war until he was sure my vital signs were stabilized. I watched him fall unconscious only when my stretcher was secured inside the transport. In that moment, my species' perception of the galaxy changed forever. The hierarchy of strength, based on who can kill most efficiently, crumbled before the evidence of who can save with the most stubbornness. The shock of my superiors when I was returned in a prisoner exchange weeks later was palpable. They did not seek to understand the military strategy behind the rescue. They sought biological logic. They could not comprehend how an apex predator could feel such deep empathy for its prey. My reports were analyzed by the highest ranks of the Krell Command. They watched the recordings from my internal sensors. They felt, through my data, the warmth of Marcus's hands and the sound of his heart protecting me. There, in the darkness of our council chambers, the seed of doubt was planted, a doubt that would eventually stop the war. Humans possess the power to be the most terrible monsters in the universe. They have the technology to erase suns and the strength to crush empires. Yet they choose, again and again, not to be. That is the true terror they now inspire. Not their capacity for destruction. Their capacity for redemption. My recovery was slow. But every time a new plate of exoskeleton grew over my scars, I remembered that this new skin existed because of a man who had no obligation to help me. The story of Marcus and my rescue on Baran leaked through quantum communication networks, becoming a modern myth that crossed front lines. What began as an isolated act of irrational compassion ended up forcing an unprecedented truce. The leaders of the Krell Confederation were forced to sit at the table with the Terran Union, not out of fear of their weapons, but out of an existential curiosity that threatened to destabilize our entire warrior culture. If strength was not the measure of all things, then our entire society needed to be rebuilt from the foundations. What became known as the Voron Protocols was approved, a series of diplomatic decrees prohibiting the abandonment of wounded on the battlefield, regardless of species. Humans, with their strange morality, had infected the galaxy with the idea that life has intrinsic value beyond its military utility. Their status shifted from expansionist plague to sacred anomaly. We see them now as guardians of a flame that the rest of us had forgotten how to kindle. But not everyone is happy with this new order. In the darkest corners of known space, races that thrive on chaos see human empathy as a weakness to be exploited. I have spent years studying human philosophy, trying to find the origin of that suicidal impulse to save the other. I have discovered that their literature is filled with monsters seeking to become men, and men fearing they might become monsters. Marcus survived his wounds, though he walks with a permanent limp, a daily reminder of the weight he carried on that forgotten planet. We write to each other often. His messages are simple, filled with a mundanity I find fascinating. He talks about the weather on Earth, about his family, about the flowers growing in his garden. These small things are, in truth, the foundations of his power. A being who appreciates the fragility of a flower is the same being who can carry a Krell warrior through a sulfurous hell. Yet, as I reflect on this, a new signal has appeared on our hive's long-range monitors. It is not a human signal, nor Krell, nor any known race. It is something ancient. Something that feels neither empathy nor hatred. Something that only consumes. And most disturbingly, it seems to be heading directly toward human worlds, drawn by the very light of that compassion that saved us. The Devourer, we began to call it. A scar in space, drifting between galaxies for eons, absorbing everything it touched. It had never encountered resistance. It had never encountered a species that fought back. But now it was coming. And it was not alone. Deep in the void, other signals had begun to emerge, faint, old, terrible. The Devourer was not a solitary predator. It was a scout, a herald, and its masters were waking. I stood on the bridge of the Krell science vessel Truthseeker, watching the dark ripple spread across our long-range scanners. Beside me, Commander Thrax, who had once been my enemy, now stood as a reluctant ally. "The humans are gathering their fleet," he said. "They know what's coming. Will we help them?" Thrax was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "The Council is debating." I looked at him. They debated while Marcus carried me through hell. They debated while the Devourer consumed human worlds. They will debate until there is nothing left to save. Thrax's mandibles tightened. "What do you propose?" "I propose we stop debating. I propose we act." I opened a channel to the human fleet. Marcus's voice came through, tired but steady. "Xel, I was wondering when you'd call. The Devourer is moving faster. You cannot stop it alone. We've been alone before. Not anymore." Behind me, the Truthseeker's engines hummed to life. Thrax had not ordered it. But he had not ordered us to stop either. Marcus laughed, a tired, warm sound. "Xel, you're going to get court-martialed." "Perhaps. But I will not get court-martialed for doing nothing." The darkness surged. The human fleet prepared to meet it. And the Truthseeker moved to join them, a small, stubborn vessel full of small, stubborn creatures who had decided that some things were worth dying for. Behind us, the galaxy watched. And in the darkness of our council chambers, the seeds of doubt were finally blooming into something new. Something that felt, against all logic, like hope. The Devourer struck Horizon first. Not with weapons. Not with ships. It simply arrived, a wave of anti-light that washed over the colony's defensive perimeter and left nothing behind. No explosions. No debris. Just absence. I watched from the Truthseeker's bridge as an entire human battle group vanished from our sensors. 12 warships. 8,000 souls. Gone between one heartbeat and the next. Shields up, I ordered. Full power to forward arrays. My tactical officer, a young Krell named Jax, stared at his display with wide eyes. Commander, the energy signature, it's not reading as any known weapon. It's not reading as any known anything. Does that matter? No, Commander. But it makes it hard to shoot back. On the human flagship, Marcus was giving orders in that calm, steady voice I had learned to recognize. His fleet was reforming, moving into a tighter formation, pulling their damaged ships behind their heavier cruisers. They were not retreating. They were repositioning. Marcus, I transmitted. My sensors cannot track the Devourer's firing pattern. There is no pattern. I know, he replied. We're working on it. How? A pause. Then, we're throwing everything we have at it until something sticks. That was not a strategy. That was desperation. And yet, watching the human ships charge forward into the darkness again and again, I understood something about them that I had missed before. They did not fight because they had a plan. They fought because stopping was not an option. The second wave of darkness came faster than the first. I saw it on our screens, a ripple of nothing expanding outward from the Devourer's core, heading straight for the human flagship. Marcus! I shouted. Evasive! I see it. He did not move. His ship held its position at the center of the formation, weapons blazing into the void, while the darkness rushed toward him. I acted without thinking. Jax, full thrust. Intercept course. Commander, that's suicide. Do it. The Truth-Seeker lurched forward, its engines screaming in protest. We crossed the distance in seconds. Seconds that felt like hours. I watched the darkness grow larger on our view screen, watched it swallow the stars one by one, watched it reach for the human ship that had become, against all logic, something like a friend. We made it. Barely. The Truth-Seeker slid between the Devourer's wave and the human flagship. Our shields flared, bright white, then red, then nothing. The hull groaned. Sparks rained from overhead conduits. But we held. The darkness passed around us, splitting into two streams that reformed behind our position. It had not destroyed us. It had flowed around us. Marcus's voice came through the calm, strained but alive. Xel, what did you just do? I have no idea. But I looked at my sensors, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. The Devourer's energy signature had shifted. It was not ignoring us anymore. It was studying us. Marcus, I said slowly, I think it's never encountered a Krell ship before. Meaning what? Meaning it didn't know how to destroy us. It had to learn. A long pause. Then, Xel, get your ship out of there. Now. Why? Because if it's learning, it's going to come back with answers. And next time, it won't miss. I looked at my damaged shields. My wounded crew. The darkness gathering on the edge of the system, preparing for another strike. No, I said. No. Marcus, you are not going to face this alone. I told you that before. I meant it. The human fleet was regrouping. The darkness was regathering. And somewhere in the depths of the Devourer's ancient consciousness, it was recalculating, readapting, learning how to kill us. I had spent my entire life training to destroy enemies I could see. Now I faced something that did not follow any rule my species had ever written. But I was not afraid. Because I had learned something from the humans, something that no Krell manual had ever taught me. Sometimes, the only way to win is to refuse to lose. All hands, I announced, prepare for second engagement. We are not leaving. My crew looked at me, some with fear, some with doubt, some with something that might have been pride. Aye, Commander, Jack said finally. We are not leaving. The darkness surged forward. The human ships turned to meet it. And the Truth-Seeker held its place between them, a small, stubborn vessel full of small, stubborn creatures who had decided that some things were worth dying for. Behind us, the galaxy watched. And in the darkness of our council chambers, the seeds of doubt were finally blooming into something new. Something that felt, against all logic, like hope. The Devourer's third wave was different. Slower. Calculated. It did not rush toward us like an avalanche. It crept, testing, probing, a predator that had learned caution. Marcus noticed it too. Xel, it's changing tactics. I see it. Our weapons are having less effect each time. It's adapting faster than we can. A flash of light interrupted him. Not from the Devourer. From behind us. I turned to the sensor display and felt my mandibles drop. Ships. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Krell warships, emerging from FTL in perfect formation, spreading across the void like a blade. Commander, Jax breathed, those are the home fleet, I finished. The Council finally made a decision. The comm channel crackled with a voice I had not heard in years. Commander Thrax, leader of the Krell High Command, his tone clipped and formal. Human fleet, this is Commander Thrax of the Krell Confederation. We are here to assist. Our scanners indicate you are in need of reinforcements. Marcus's response came after a long pause. Commander Thrax, I appreciate the help. But why now? A longer pause. Then Thrax said something I never expected to hear from a Krell commander. Because we should have come sooner. The Devourer's wave hit the Krell formation first. Our ships were built for this. Heavy armor, redundant shields, weapons designed to punch through the toughest defenses. But the Devourer's darkness did not care about armor. It did not care about shields. It cared only about consumption. 3 Krell cruisers vanished in the first minute. Thrax did not flinch. All ships, Titan formation. Rotate damaged vessels to the rear. We hold the line. Holding the line was not a Krell phrase. It was a human one. I wondered how long Thrax had been studying them. The battle lasted hours. Our combined fleet fought wave after wave of darkness, losing ships, losing soldiers, losing hope. But we did not break. The humans refused to retreat. The Krell refused to abandon them. And slowly, something began to change. The Devourer's attacks grew weaker. Not because we were damaging it, we could not even find its core, but because it was running out of something. Energy. Mass. I did not know. But the darkness was thinning. Marcus, I transmitted, the Devourer is weakening. I do not know why. Maybe it's not used to fighting back, he said. Maybe it's only ever faced prey that ran. I looked at the display. The human fleet was shattered, less than half its original strength. The Krell fleet was in similar condition. But the Devourer was slowing. One more push, Marcus said. Everyone. Everything. Now. I did not hesitate. All ships, this is Commander Xel. Full forward. Maximum firepower. We end this. The combined fleet surged forward, humans and Krell together, their ships intermingled in a formation that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. We fired everything we had. Rail guns. Plasma cannons. Experimental weapons that the humans had been saving for an emergency. The Devourer screamed. Not a sound, a psychic pulse that tore through my mind, through the minds of my crew, through every being in the system. I saw images. Memories. Ancient worlds consumed by darkness, civilizations wiped from existence, stars swallowed whole. The Devourer was not a weapon. It was a scar, the remnants of something that had been destroyed long ago, given purpose by the void between galaxies. It had been drifting for eons, consuming whatever it found, growing stronger with each meal. But it had never encountered prey that fought back. Prey that refused to run. Prey that would rather die than surrender. The darkness collapsed. Not exploding, simply ceasing, folding in on itself until there was nothing left but empty space and the scattered wreckage of 2 fleets that had decided to stand together. Silence filled the comm channels. Then Marcus spoke. Xel, we're still here. I looked at my damaged ship. My wounded crew. The stars shining through the holes in our hull. Yes, I said. We are. The war ended that day. Not because one side defeated the other, but because both sides realized they had been fighting the wrong enemy. The Devourer was gone, but something else had taken its place. Something that the galaxy had never seen before. An alliance. I sat in my quarters that night, watching the stars through a cracked viewport. Marcus sent me a message. Short, simple, human. Thank you. For not running. I typed my reply. I learned that from you. The galaxy would never be the same. But for the first time in my life, I thought that might be a good thing. The Krell and the humans had shed blood together. We had lost ships, soldiers, friends. But we had gained something too. Hope. And hope, I was learning, was the most dangerous weapon of all. Not because it destroyed enemies. Because it created allies. And allies, it turned out, were much harder to kill. The Devourer was not dead. It had retreated, wounded, diminished, but alive. Somewhere in the void between galaxies, it was rebuilding, learning, waiting. But when it returned, it would not find a divided galaxy. It would not find prey that ran. It would find humans and Krell standing together. And that, I had come to believe, might be enough. The Devourer did not die. That was the first thing I learned in the days after the battle. It withdrew, wounded, diminished, but alive. Somewhere in the void between galaxies, it was rebuilding, learning, waiting. The scar had not been erased. Only postponed. But something else had been born. In the weeks that followed, the Krell High Command and the Terran Union signed the Accord of Baran, named for the planet where a human had carried a Krell soldier through hell. The treaty did more than end hostilities. It created something unprecedented, a joint military command, shared technology protocols, and a mutual defense pact that extended across both species' territories. Commander Thrax stood beside Marcus at the signing ceremony. They did not shake hands. Krell did not shake hands, but they stood close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. That was as close to friendship as our species had ever come. I attended the ceremony as a guest of honor. Marcus found me afterward, standing alone by a viewport, watching the stars. "Xel," he said, "you're brooding. I am reflecting. There is a difference. Same thing, different word." I turned to look at him. He walked with a cane now. The damage from Baran had never fully healed, and the battle against the Devourer had added new scars to his collection. But his eyes were the same. Intense. Alive. Unwilling to look away from anything. "The Devourer will return," I said. "I know. Next time, it will be stronger." "I know. And we may not win." He smiled. It was the same strange expression I had seen on Baran, the one that had terrified me at first, and now, somehow, comforted me. "Xel, we've been losing for most of our history. We're used to it. But we're also used to getting back up. That is not a strategy. No. It's a promise." I did not know what to say to that. So I said nothing. I stood beside him at the viewport, watching the stars, and I thought about everything that had changed since a human soldier had knelt in the ash of a dying world and refused to let me die. The Voran protocols had spread beyond our two species. Other civilizations, watching from the shadows, had begun adopting similar laws. Wounded soldiers were no longer abandoned on battlefields. Medical aid was extended to enemies as well as allies. The old ways, the brutal, efficient ways, were dying. Not quickly. Not without resistance. But dying. "You're going back to the hive?" Marcus asked. "Yes. My crew needs me. They're going to promote you. They are going to court-martial me. I disobeyed direct orders. You saved my ship. You saved my crew. You saved the idea that we could work together. That is not a defense. It's the truth. And the truth is usually a pretty good defense." I looked at him for a long moment. "Marcus, thank you for not leaving me on Baran." He looked back at me. "You already repaid that debt, Xel. 100 times over." "I was not repaying a debt. I was doing what you taught me." "What did I teach you?" I thought about the scavenger drones, the acid storms, the weight of his body against mine as he carried me through hell. That being strong is not about winning. It is about refusing to lose. He smiled again, a tired, warm, human smile. "Yeah," he said. "That's about right." The transport ship carried me back toward Krell space. Through the viewport, I watched the human fleet grow smaller, then disappear. Marcus had returned to Earth, to his garden, to his family. The war was over. The peace had begun. But the Devourer was still out there. waiting, learning, growing stronger. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, the old scar was healing, preparing to strike again. I did not know if we would win the next battle. I did not know if the alliance between humans and Krell would hold, or if the old hatreds would resurface, or if the galaxy would slide back into the brutal hierarchies that had defined it for so long. But I knew one thing. When the darkness came again, I would not face it alone. I would face it beside the most stubborn, irrational, compassionate species in the universe. The species that had looked at a dying enemy and seen someone worth saving. I closed my eyes and listened to the hum of the engines. Somewhere ahead, my hive waited. Somewhere behind, my friends. And somewhere in the void, the devourer dreamed of consuming us all. Let it dream. We would be ready. Not because we were stronger. Because we had learned to stand together. And standing together, I had discovered, was the most powerful weapon of all. 1 year after the Battle of Horizon, I stood on Earth for the first time. The sky was blue, not the orange of Baran, not the deep violet of Krell space, but blue. Unfamiliar. Beautiful. Marcus met me at the landing field. He walked without his cane now, though his limp remained, a reminder of everything he had carried. He smiled when he saw me. Xel. You came. You invited me. I didn't think you'd actually show up. I am a creature of habit. You invited. I came. That is how invitations work. He laughed. It was a good sound, warm and unguarded. I had learned to appreciate human laughter over the past year. It was nothing like Krell communication, imprecise, emotional, inefficient. But it was genuine. We walked through his garden. He showed me the flowers he had told me about in his messages. Roses, he called them, though they looked nothing like the crystalline formations I had expected. They were soft, fragile, easily crushed. They're beautiful, I said. They're a pain to maintain, he replied. But worth it. I understood. The garden was not about the flowers. It was about the act of tending, the choice to nurture rather than destroy. We sat on a bench overlooking a field of green grass, he called it, though it bore no resemblance to the hardy mosses of Krell worlds. The sun was warm on my exoskeleton. Strange, but not unpleasant. The Council approved the Joint Defense Initiative, I said. Krell and human ships will patrol the border together. If the Devourer returns, we will face it as one fleet. Marcus nodded. And the Voran protocols? 17 species have signed. More are considering. The old ways are dying. Good. I looked at him. You are not surprised. I've been watching the galaxy for a long time, Xel. I've seen a lot of things change. But I've never seen compassion spread this fast. Perhaps it was always there, waiting for someone to show that it worked. He smiled again. Maybe. We sat in silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The sky turned orange, like Baran, like the world where everything had changed. But this orange was different. This orange was peace. Marcus, I said. Thank you. For everything. You already thanked me. I know. But I wanted to do it again. He looked at me. You're welcome, Xel. For everything. The sun set. The stars came out. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, the Devourer waited, wounded, diminished, but still alive. It would return. We both knew that. But when it did, it would not find a divided galaxy. It would not find prey that ran. It would find humans and Krell and a dozen other species standing together, shoulder to shoulder, refusing to lose. Because that was what we had learned. Not how to win. How to refuse to lose. And sometimes that was enough. I stood up. I should go. My ship leaves at dawn. Marcus stood too, wincing slightly as he put weight on his bad leg. Come back any time. The garden will be here. I will hold you to that. We did not shake hands. We did not embrace. That was not our way. But I touched my forehead to his, a Krell gesture of respect that I had never offered anyone outside my hive. He did not flinch. He simply nodded. Safe travels, Xel. Safe garden, Marcus. I walked back toward the transport, toward my ship, toward the stars. Behind me, the human stood in his garden, surrounded by fragile flowers, watching me go. The war was over. The peace had begun. And somewhere in the void, the devourer dreamed of consuming us all. Let it dream. We would be ready, because we had learned to stand together. And standing together, I had discovered, was the most powerful weapon in the universe. Not stronger than darkness, but stubborn enough to outlast it. I climbed aboard the transport. The engines hummed to life. Through the viewport, I watched Earth grow small, a blue marble hanging in the void. "Take me home," I said. The ship rose toward the stars. And the galaxy, for the first time in a very long time, felt almost safe.